We're here.
So we are going to do an introduction for everyone. We are live. What's going on, everyone? What's happening? It's your man NIC from the Urban Collective alongside.
What's up, everybody? It's your girl Bernadine Truth checking in with the collective.
How's everyone doing? We want to say what's up. We have two special guests with us today. I know we had an episode the other day we were talking about, and we wanted to have two people just talk to us about this whole situation that's happening with COVID-19 and how everyone is taking it, how everyone is adjusting to this situation. As you know, it's only increasing daily by the numbers. I believe today we crossed over 1,000 people that have passed away from COVID-19 just in the US alone. So it is an epidemic. It is growing by the day. So today we have two guests. I'm going to let Bernadine introduce our guest today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, NIC. So as you said, we have two amazing guests with us. The first celebrity guest interview that we have is Dr. Nicolette Fontaine. Nicolette is currently an internal medicine physician at Chestnut Hill, West Roxbury's Harvard Vanguard. In the Atrius Health, her career in medicine includes, but is not limited to, being the clinical director at the BU Medical Group, a breast health consultant at Quincy Medical Center and Boston Medical Center, and a medical director at Corita St. Elizabeth Center for weight control. She is also an alumna of University of Massachusetts Medical School. Nicolette proudly holds her certification from the American Board of Internal Medicine. She is the member of the Massachusetts Medical Society and holds educational experience as a clinical instructor at Harvard Medical School and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Titles and positions she holds or has held confidently, communicating in three dominant languages, everyone. Three dominant languages: French, Haitian Creole, and English. So without further ado, can everybody say hi to Dr. Nicolette Fontaine?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, Nicolette, say hi to the people. They're watching you. Awesome. All right. And then our next celebrity guest, we have Celeste Vissiere, who is a renowned therapist, mental health advocate, best-selling author, and podcast host. She is frequently quoted by the media as a mental health expert, including NBC News, Vice, Healthline, Bustle, and much more. Celeste has been in the mental health field for more than 15 years and believes in the power of living a conscious life. She has dedicated her personal and professional endeavors to breaking the stigma surrounding mental and emotional health, especially in communities of color. Her podcast, Celeste the Therapist, focuses on ways to shift your mindset and change your thought process. Celeste's private practice, the Uniting Center, is based in the Boston area, and she holds a master's degree in counseling from the University of Massachusetts, Boston. So Celeste, say hello to the people.
Hi, everybody.
We're really excited, as NIC said, to have you all on air to really share your expertise on what's going on with COVID-19. And to also, again, I want to take a moment and highlight you all as women of color and it's Women History Month. So thank you all for really leading the way in the field of STEM. NIC, take it away.
Yes. Thank you, Bernadine, for the great introduction. Sorry, I just got a breaking news saying that we just passed Italy as the second largest behind China with the number of confirmed cases as of today. So that's why we're doing this, because this is something that is happening and changing by the day, by the hour. So I wanted to start out by asking Nicolette, because you are a doctor, you are in the medical field. What does being a doctor in internal medicine mean with regard to your day-to-day responsibilities that you have to deal with right now?
Yes. So I am a primary care physician. So that means that I see healthy people for physical exam and with the goal of keeping healthy people healthy. So we talk about kind of the good, healthy diet, regular exercise, watching your cholesterol, preventing diabetes. And also we kind of basically, when you come for a physical, we talk about, emotional health. Are you anxious? Are you depressed? So with healthy people, we try to prevent illness. And with people who have illness or conditions such as high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol, we try to manage those as well in order to prevent complications. So to prevent heart attacks and strokes, and things like that. So we try to keep people healthy, healthy people healthy, and we try to manage the conditions of people with chronic illness so that we prevent complications.
Thank you so much for that lovely overview of what you do, particularly as a primary care physician. I think it's really important for us to understand, generally what you all do on a day-to-day. Celeste, can you talk to us a little bit about what exactly being a therapist entails and what your day-to-day regularly outside of even COVID-19 typically looks like?
Yeah, so I mean, January 2020, I went online, so I only do telehealth. So I see adult clients, men and women, and they are going through transition, dealing with depression, anxiety, numerous of different things that they're struggling with. So I kind of help break down some of the layers, because sometimes I think it feels like it's so complicated, so people don't know where to start. And so I kind of help people dissect everything and kind of make it into these little categories, and we kind of pick it apart to figure out a plan to help them with the issues that they're struggling with.
Okay. So thank you to both of you. Thank you, Celeste, for explaining your day-to-day, what you do. This question is going to go to both of you. And basically with COVID-19 being rampant in the United States now, how has that affected your work that you do, and self-care also for the both of you? What does that look like?
Yeah, for me, usually in the past, I would see more, I would be in the clinic and see patients face-to-face. But since, with the prevalence of COVID-19, now we're switching to more telehealth. So we're doing more, visits via telephone, via video, so that, the people who are older are not having to come out and be exposed. It's also easier for the very old, to talk to me from their home than to kind of basically come into the clinic. The other thing also is that we are rapidly trying to change our practice in order to accommodate people who will be coming in urgent care.
Gotcha.
Because we think that as people develop symptoms, they'll be wanting to get care quickly. So as opposed to booking our schedules ahead of time with people with chronic illnesses, we are making space for people who will need to come, kind of basically for COVID-19 symptoms. The other part also is trying to separate people with COVID-19 symptoms from people who may need to come in for urgent care, but for something like a twisted ankle, for example. Do not want to expose the two because COVID-19 is very, it's easily transmissible. So that's been the transition.
How are you going about separating the people? You said you don't want the sprained ankle to come in with somebody who might be exposed, but how do you go about making that happen?
Yeah, so the system as a whole, the ACS health system as a whole is basically dedicating certain buildings that will be slated to see COVID-19 patients, and other buildings will be slated for regular urgent care for non-COVID patients.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
And Celeste, so for you, how has it affected you with you being a therapist in the field in your day-to-day care? How are you handling yourself?
So for me, the last 2 weeks have been extremely busy. I've been really kind of proactive with, we're in week 2. I want to say only week 2 because we don't know how long this is going to be. So, I think for the first few days, may not have really felt the impact mentally, right? And down the road, the more we kind of stay isolated and kind of feeling stuck in our homes, that can take a toll on your mental health. So for me as a clinician with my clients, I've been really proactive with kind of getting them to create some kind of schedule for themselves, paying attention to how much they're sleeping, what they're eating. I think the eating part is a huge part of what people are going to be struggling with, because we're going to eat because we're bored. That's going to bring on more complications. So just kind of, thinking more down the road, so that the things that people may not be thinking about, just kind of educating people around that piece.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, that's one thing I've had to change myself with the eating and everything like that, going out, doing exercising, using certain apps, because I realized you just start snacking for no reason because you're in the house, and especially you stockpile.
People are bored. Yeah. People are bored. They're like, what is there to do? Let me eat these chips. What is there to do? Let me fry some fish. Eat an apple. I hear you.
And I think that even outside of the eating piece, the routine, I think, and Dr. Fontaine can attest to the fact that our brain needs structure. A lot of times when people retire, they struggle with the retirement, because it's like, what do I do now? So literally everybody is in this retirement mode or detox mode, and a lot of symptoms are coming out because of it.
I hear that. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to jump in. You're jumping ahead of us, Celeste. We have some questions, but hold on to that. Cause I'm like, we have these questions as far as like, what should people really be doing? No. I'm excited. I'm like, keep it coming. But it's really important, again, to really think about like where we are as far as our state of mind. Dr. Fontaine, thinking about this COVID-19 infectious virus, and that's taking place right now. When, in your expertise, like when would you say it's most contagious and infectious to other people?
So people are most contagious when they are symptomatic.
Okay.
So basically, someone who's coughing, who has a fever, is more likely to pass the virus. Okay. But we do know as well that there has been cases where the person is not yet symptomatic, but let's say they're sitting next to you and talking to you for a long time, but they don't know they have the illness yet. So meaning that they're not symptomatic, they have the virus within them, but they're not yet symptomatic, they can still pass it. But less likely than getting the virus from someone who's actively coughing.
Right. Because I remember they were saying, right, so like your symptoms, you could even demonstrate symptoms somewhere between like 2 to 14 days even after like a potential exposure to it. And so, some people have contracted the virus and didn't even know they had it, and then have passed it on to somebody else, right? Do you feel like hospitals are equipped to handle this epidemic, or at least in Boston?
Well, no, I mean, I think every healthcare system is moving to try to contain it. They're doing their best to try to increase hospital beds, secure personal protective equipment for their members, and also for patients, ventilators if they need that. So everyone is trying.
Right. How are you feeling about it? Do you feel like we're ready? Do you feel like we're capable? Do you feel like it's just a moving object?
Well, no, I think we are doing our best.
Yeah.
And kind of basically we hope and pray that this will be kind of basically not a long ordeal, but hopefully maybe in the next 6 weeks or so, or 12 weeks, we could be kind of looking at it from something that we've passed.
Yeah.
You said 12 weeks. That is 3 more months. Oh my God.
Exactly.
No one knows.
Quarantine yourself, people. Quarantine.
I don't know if I can stay in this house for 3 more months, but I will for humanity. I'm struggling.
We're hoping. No one knows for sure. This is really a new virus.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. So with that also, I wanted to ask you, Celeste, what can people do to get over the fear of catching COVID-19? You have people out there that are not going out at all. They're staying inside. They're not going for a walk, exercising, or doing anything, and quarantining themselves. And also when they're quarantining themselves, they're in a house with other people. So should they be in different rooms and everything also with that?
So I think, people like Dr. Fontaine and like the CDC, they're people in the medical field that have that knowledge around safety precautions. And unfortunately, with social media and the internet, everybody has their theories and are going to be giving their own suggestions. And I think we need to work on filtering out the information that we're receiving, and making sure that we're educating ourselves around healthy precautions. So, when that fear comes in around, I don't even want to, step on my porch and get some fresh air. The CDC didn't say that you couldn't be on your porch and getting any fresh air. So just being mindful of where you're getting your information from, and making sure you're getting it from a reputable source.
Absolutely. So go ahead. So Dr. Fontaine, you look like you wanted to add to that. Go for it.
Yes, I do think kind of basically, as Celeste was saying, basically we're indoors. I think it's good to kind of establish a healthy routine. You're kind of doing the things that we're responsible for doing, whether for school or for work, but also, kind of basically eating on a schedule. And making sure that the plate is balanced, right? You have your carbs, you have your protein, you have your fruit, your vegetable. And as we are indoors, I know we can't go to gyms, but but we have kind of all these devices, right? You can kind of basically get exercise classes online, right? Kind of basically, streamed to your phone or to your computer. Take a break from the routine and do something. Our bodies are meant to move.
Yeah. Right.
And also it can serve as a way to kind of basically control some of the anxiety around what's going on.
That's true.
Right. Yeah, I know. Because you just need to get your I don't have the medical terms, but I would imagine the adrenaline flowing, right? And just feeling good, because it just makes sense to just have that level of movement. I feel like a lot of us are working from home and we're just like, what pajamas are you going to wear for the office today? Still go take a shower, brush your teeth, the basics. But to both of you, as we continue to really think about, and particularly, you, Dr. Fontaine, being out there and being considered one of the individuals who are on the front line, what are some words of advice or encouragement or steps people need to take to support specifically those who are on the front lines during this time?
Yeah, and so I don't want to take all the credit. I'm in an office setting, so usually I'm not in the hospital. I'm in a clinic. I'm in a private. Okay. I'm in a clinic, not private, but group practice. And so kind of basically, I will be seeing some patients with COVID-19 symptoms, but I will not be in the ER.
Yep.
Kind of basically in acute care hospitals. Now, those people are really on the very front line, right? But the thing is, I think in terms of what the public can do to help in this crisis, one, definitely take good care of yourself and your family. Right? Basically keep well informed. Go to the CDC website, see what's happening in your community. Are there more cases in the community? You want to kind of basically, if somebody's coughing or sneezing, kind of basically, stay away. Or if you're helping them directly because they're family members, then you have to be protected.
Right.
Washing hands, before eating and after coming from public places. And basically not only take good care of yourself, but basically in clinic, I have 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds who cannot get out. And so maybe also watching out for your neighbor.
Right.
Kind of an older person down the street, if they cannot get out, when you're getting out, can you bring them something? And I think in terms of taking care of yourself, staying well informed, kind of trying to prevent illness, I'm a woman of faith. I think kind of basically pray that this goes away and fast.
Absolutely. So we had a comment, shout outs to Irving Goldson, who works for ABCD, who also mentioned, right? So like right now in this time, we're really practicing social and physical distancing. And so, what is that balance of still as Caribbeans, as island people who build community all the time or with our family all the time, what does that look like for your families, right? When you're social distancing from a loved one, because we still want to congregate together, but that person may have this virus if they're out and about as well. So can either of you provide some insight on that? Social distancing with family.
So I think it's hard, the concept of having to look at your family on a screen. And so it's okay to kind of be sad that you can't physically be there. But I think it's important not to get stuck in the the fact that you cannot do something and just kind of look on this kind of new norm, so that you can still get the conversation and still look at them. I mean, that's the beauty of 2020, is that we do have technology so that we can see people. So I think, like Dr. Fontaine said, if we can like put it in our schedule, 4:15, call X, Y, and Z to check in. You have that to look forward to, and you're still getting kind of that dose of connection, and just kind of scheduling it day by day. I think that would be important.
Thank you so much.
But I do think as well, I mean, the thing is, there's the nuclear family. These are the people that are in your household.
Yeah.
They are extended family. So I think in terms of basically this, like usually on Sunday afternoon, we all gather over my mother's house, all of us. I mean, we don't do that right now, right? But the thing is, in terms of the people in your households, I think kind of basically, if people start to develop symptoms, maybe they should move away a little bit. Right? Maybe you're not sharing the same glass, though, or kind of eating from the same plate. If I'm sick, I don't want my kids to get what I have, right? So if you start feeling sick, then I would kind of basically step back a little bit and put a little distance between yourself and the rest of the nuclear family.
Yeah, talking about that, Dr. Fontaine, there's a lot of myths that's out there that people that have been said all about COVID-19. What do you see that the physicians should dispel, somebody like yourself, should let our viewers know and dispel about these myths that are out there about patients and how people catch COVID-19?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think, basically, for one, we should know that COVID-19 can affect both young and old. It's a global outbreak. So everywhere around, just most places around the world are feeling its effect. So it's not a Chinese thing. It's a global thing. We're all in this together. In terms of how it's transmitted, basically, the virus lives in your respiratory droplets. So if you cough or sneeze, there are droplets that come from the mouth or the nose and spray the space around you. And so the person standing next to you, if they're close enough, then actually inhale those droplets, or some of the particles end up in either their eyes, their nose, and the mouth. That's how the virus spreads. The virus can kind of live on some surfaces for a number of hours, door handles, light switches, things like that. But for the most part, it's felt that it's being spread from person to person.
Okay.
So the thing is, basically, I think the same things that we've been hearing definitely applies. If you, kind of wash your hands, and stay 6 feet away from the next person.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. As far as like that distancing, again, I think we can't continue to reiterate it enough, right? Like physical distancing makes a difference. Social distancing is not just about getting together with your friends outside of the home, but also, like you were saying, Dr. Fontaine, if somebody's feeling sick, then don't share, right? Like don't share food, don't share plates, and just being very wise in that sense. So thank you so much.
Before we move on, actually, Dr. Fontaine, we had a guest that asked, can COVID-19 live on clothing? If so, for how long does that happen?
Yeah, so the thing is, they've done some experiments. And so in the lab, they've actually kind of basically sprayed some aerosol containing the virus on different particles, on cardboard, on kind of basically things like metal, and so the thing is, in the air, it can live for like about 2.7 hours, almost 3 hours in the air. On surfaces, basically, again, it depends on the, kind of whether you're outside or whether you're inside, or if it's within mucus. So if it's embedded within mucus, it can live longer. So on something like clothing, kind of basically on door handles, it could stay for something like metal. It can stay for a couple of days, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, days, especially if the environment for the virus is right.
And what does right mean? Like, what does that look like?
Well, the thing is, I mean, I think kind of basically we're still learning more and more about COVID-19.
Right.
It's really a novel, it's really a new virus. So the thing is basically, I think if there is mucus, let's say somebody sneezes and there's a glob of mucus, the virus can live within that for a while. But if the conditions are dry and it's, kind of basically, so it depends on the environment.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't like us to dwell on that, because I think the more likely way to get this is from one person to another.
Gotcha.
All right. So I want to just reiterate that so Dr. Fontaine does not want us to harp on the fact that it could live in mucus for a long time or on our doorknobs. Okay. So I don't want people to not want to open their doors or like be in any type of dysfunction. Because I mean, I think really, and that's why we're excited to have both of you on air with us, because we want to have that balance, right? Of like the medical precautions, but then also like mental health and well-being is really important, because we don't want people to live in fear too much, but we also understand that prioritizing and understanding the seriousness of this is necessary as well, right? So how do we navigate all of that? So thank you so much, Dr. Fontaine, for your perspective. This question, go ahead.
I think what it is also is basically, I mean, when we talk about, how does someone get sick, right? The mechanism of illness. So you have basically the virus itself, which is, pretty easily transmissible. But then you also have the person being exposed. How healthy are they, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, I mean, when I say, okay, it can stay in the air, yes, it can. But I'm not saying that that is the likely way of someone getting sick, right? Unless maybe if the person coming into that space is kind of basically has a lot of medical conditions already, is much older, maybe they're immunosuppressed. Do you see what I'm saying? So the thing is basically there's the virus, but then there's the person coming into that space, and how young and healthy are they? If they're young and healthy, then their immune system is a bit stronger. Someone who's older, who has a lot of medical illness, who's maybe immunosuppressed or has cancer, that person is much more vulnerable.
How does it impact smokers? Is there a significant difference there between their lungs and capabilities?
Yeah, I want to say yes, because the thing is, smoking impairs the normal functioning of the lung. So sometimes, even though maybe someone has not been diagnosed with asthma or emphysema yet, we do know that the lung of a smoker doesn't work the same way. It doesn't work as well as the lung of someone who does not.
Okay. Thank you so much. Truly, listen, you all, myths are myths, but reality is reality. And the truth is, I think really the undertone there is that it's a forever evolving virus, and the impacts of something or the influence and the opportunities or potential of getting it, right, is something we're still studying and learning regularly. But again, it's using common practice and how we maneuver through regular traditional colds, and just understanding how it's important to prioritize how you live with other people, and what that relationship is like, and what your health looks like in those spaces. Celeste, we understanding again, like the mental health and emotional, physical well-being of people. What are some steps you feel like people can take to implement structure and address like maybe hardships that might arise in their lives from having to stay home and like socially and physically distancing themselves from other people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of people I've noticed just from reading statuses on social media are really struggling with kind of being stuck inside. Some people have been used to partying every weekend. Some people have been used to help.
I don't party. I socialize frequently.
Okay, yeah.
Some people are socialites, social butterflies, and and there are some people that actually have utilized or have flourished with just helping other people, right? Whether it's their jobs and being able to provide different types of support. And so what's happening is, because people haven't been able to make space, right? In America, we are on the go constantly. And a lot of times we haven't made space to be still and kind of process our day, not even in small increments. And so now you go from like one extreme to another. And so that's why it's important now to understand, like, you're kind of going through this detox. You're having like some withdrawal symptoms where you may find yourself irritable and struggling with, you may be struggling with like trying to adjust to the new norm. And so some really good tips are to create a routine for yourself, kind of like what Dr. Fontaine discussed earlier. Food, body movement, and sleep are huge. Even if we're not talking about our mental, even if we're not talking about COVID, just in general with our mental status, it looks differently when we get enough sleep, when we're nourishing our bodies, and when we're moving our bodies. And so another thing is structure. Like Bernadine said earlier, get up, take a shower, wash your face, brush your teeth. If you work, create that work schedule. And if you don't work, if you're at home, you're not working, create some kind of routine where you're like checking in with a friend, a family member, you're scheduling meals. Food can become a source of relief, an addiction. Food can become an addiction, and so making sure you're scheduling healthy meals so you're not eating all the time, and going to bed at a decent time is going to be important. And then if you are in close quarters with other people, and you're on top of each other, trying to kind of walk away if you feel irritable, like give each other some space, especially people that are partners that may, one person may need more than the other person. Try to take some space on your own, so that when people are trying to communicate, when they're irritated, it makes it more complicated.
How about for parents with children, right? I've seen a lot of memes and posts like, somebody get this child, like, I'm so grateful for teachers, because teachers, like, you have my kid all day, I don't know what to do with them. So, people are getting stir crazy with their kids, or maybe people who are caring for the elderly, or maybe even people who are struggling to have access to resources, right? Like, how can we kind of like support them too?
Yeah, I think first, be patient with yourself. Don't feel like you have to be like super mom. I know when this first started, people were posting all these schedules that they were going to do. And you may see people that are able to adhere to that schedule, and you feel you're struggling because you can't. And, this is a new system for everybody. So be patient with yourself. I think as a parent, please take care of yourself first, because when you take care of yourself, you'll have more energy to give to your kids. So even though I'm a therapist, I've been working from home, I haven't had to work with all four of my kids in the home. And so, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, I will say, like, give me a second, like, let's take some space, so I can catch my breath and breathe. And so, like, I use that language around them, because they know, okay, like, mommy needs a break, and I need a break from you. And that doesn't mean I don't love my kid. We love our kids, but we need to have that break in that space, even if it's just 5 minutes to just take some deep breaths. I think that's important.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
I have a follow-up question for you, Celeste. I know New York right now, they're doing providing free therapy for people that can't afford it or anything like that. Have you heard about anything of that case happening in Boston or in Massachusetts as a whole?
No, I haven't heard of anything like that. One thing I've seen in general is a lot of people kind of talking about different mental health, like healing modalities. So I've seen people doing like free yoga classes online, because therapy is not the only modality of mental health. That's something that I really want people to like understand. So definitely like looking at like your mental health in a holistic way, and whether you don't have insurance or can afford therapy, don't sit in that and think that I can't be okay because of it. Really start to educate and research about what other things can I do in the meantime to make sure that I'm okay.
And I'd also add, not that I'm a clinician, but I think meditation is super helpful too, to really allow people to center themselves and just sit. And I think sometimes meditation can also take the form of prayer, and really just being by oneself and your own thoughts, to really check in with your body. Because I think even now during this time, people are so focused on, how do I get through this? How do I get through this? But ask yourself, how are you doing, and how are you actually feeling in this current moment too? And just silencing the outside noise to check in with yourself is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we know COVID-19 does not discriminate. Doesn't matter sex, who you are, what nationality that you are. Everyone is getting this virus that's out there. So we have a lot of people that are very fragile. We have a very fragile population that's out there that are getting this. One of the things that's been happening is a lot of people are experiencing a lot of physical violence. A lot of people are experiencing some emotional and sexual abuse also during this time. We've seen the case of verbal abuse rising within the homes for that. How do we deal with that? How do patients or how do people that are experiencing this deal with this, Dr. Fontaine?
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of, I think usually if someone, kind of basically, complains of any type of violence, whether it's in the form of words or actions or kind of basically maybe financial or, kind of physical, sexual. So usually we try to refer them pretty quickly to a mental health provider. Right. And so that's kind of basically, I don't know if Celeste has.
Yeah, that's a question that's open to both of you,
Yeah,
as far as like, what does support look like for those who are most vulnerable and fragile in these times where we're practicing social distancing, right? And so people aren't necessarily able to check up on you. Your social worker may not be able to do that home visit, but you have a case, or we have a child who might be in jeopardy, or an elderly person who might be abused, or
So as far as so the hotlines are still open. Those lines haven't stopped. There is a crisis text line as well, crisistextline.org, 714141. And I would highly suggest people first think about their safety. I think when people are in domestic violence situations, a lot of times we want to say run or do this or do that, kind of really thinking about your safety. And if you are going to reach out to these if it's a domestic violence hotline, or the DCF, like just making sure you're safe first, like you have a safety plan to do that. And then there's still measures in place. I don't work in that atmosphere, but I know that there's still measures in place for people that are experiencing violence. And I know now with everybody being in close quarters, the rates of violence has increased dramatically. And so, I really want to, if you're listening to this and that's you, definitely reach out for support because and make sure you're safe when you do it. Make sure you have a safety plan to do it.
Absolutely. And don't think because of social distancing that people can't come to your home in a crisis and an emergency. So I don't want people to feel like because, they're not going to come anyway because of this time. Actually, that's not the case. In extreme situations, people will be there. Mm-hmm. Similarly to food shelters and pantries, people are providing services. There's also delivery services. So if, again, you yourself are experiencing it or have someone in your life who's experiencing a hardship, please reach out to resources and just stay connected no matter what. To both, I think in that same breath, to both of you, really kind of zeroing it down into Boston specifically, what do you all think people in Boston can do to support the residents of its own community and of its own environment? I know we talked about, taking, like, washing our hands and staying clean and all of that, but I wasn't sure if there were any policies or procedures or certain spaces that you were all familiar of or with, to think about what Boston community looks like during this time.
So the thing is, I think in times of crisis, the most vulnerable tend to suffer more. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, basically, I think I am aware of even basically though Boston is, kind of basically rich in hospitals and medicine and culture and all that, we still have people with food insecurity. They're not sure, when they get up, how many meals they're going to get for that day, right? And so the thing is, at time of crisis, I think going back to the basics, making sure that people have secure housing, meaning that they're not going to be evicted from their homes. And I think, basically, I think the mayor and the governor have been talking about, basically, during the time of crisis, they do not want anyone being kind of basically evicted or, but also I think access to food, at this time. So the thing is, I know we have a lot of pantries, some who will actually deliver food. And I don't know if you all on the show have access to list of pantries,
Yep.
that are kind of basically close to the Boston area. And other things as well would be, again, I mean, I think kind of we have people who are 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, some with children far away, with very difficult to get out of their homes. And so I think at this times of crisis, it's good to reach out that older person across the street or in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
If they need anything, you don't need to be close to them, but knock on the door, stay 6 feet away. Can I get you something? I'm going to the market. Can I bring you back something? So I think we have to look out for kind of basically the next person. And I think kind of basically usually kind of in this age of fast moving, fast paced, we're always running. Maybe now we have a little more time, kind of basically to kind of reflect and consider and kind of see the people maybe that we were too busy to see.
Absolutely.
That's
Thank you
very
so much
true.
for that. That's very true.
Yeah.
And it's definitely causing us to really reflect on how important people are to us and how we're checking in with one another too, regularly.
Yeah. One question I did want to ask both of you.
Oh, Celeste didn't answer the question about Boston.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I apologize. For that.
No, Dr. Fontaine did an amazing job. That's why he forgot.
Okay, no, go for it. If you wanted to add, go for it.
Everything that Dr. Fontaine said is true, and checking in on our neighbors, and also, I think people that have already been in abusive situations where it's run rampant, kind of checking in on that person. You don't have to specifically ask, hey, are you being abused? But just so that they know that you're there, I think that's important, so that when they are ready to kind of ask for help, that can happen. So still staying connected. One thing about isolation is that it can take us to a deep depression state. And the more that we're isolated, the more that we're depressed, the more we start to feel like we're alone in this struggle. And the reality is that we're not alone. I've seen amazing steps by the community in Boston, coming together, feeding the kids, like even the city of the school system. I've seen them do an amazing job with the way they're getting these Chromebooks out to the kids.
Shout out to BPS.
Yeah, so amazing. And then
school meals as well.
Yes. Like I've just seen, like, it gives me chills as I talk about it, because I'm just really grateful that, like, even though we do have this income gap and the way that Boston operates, I've seen things come together. And then I would just add, like, the city of Boston has a mayor's hotline, 311 or 617-635-4500, because there's so many different types of needs, and they have a list of all the different things that are available in Boston right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
great.
Celeste. Thank you for the resources.
Yeah. So I think times of crisis definitely can bring us together, can pull us together.
Yes.
Absolutely. And we're watching it happen.
True. That is very true. One question I did have for the both of you is, what is their final advice or anything that you can give to our listeners that's watching us out there and who's going to be listening via the podcast later on? Yeah.
So one of the things definitely I wanted to go over, these are the symptoms of COVID-19, right? So when you first get it, you may not feel anything for, kind of basically 4 or 5 days. Some people by day 6, 7, they're kind of developing symptoms. Some people as long as 12 days after exposure, that's when they're developing symptoms. So the average time between the time you expose to symptoms is about anywhere from 4 or 5 to about 12 days. So and the symptoms are usually it's like you feel as if you have the flu. I don't know if a lot of you has had the flu.
I've had the flu.
So where you just feel terrible, you feel malaise, you feel unwell, you feel ill. Kind of basically your muscle aches, you're tired. Basically nasal congestion, your nose is congested or running. There's a cough and also a fever, okay, that develops. So these are the typical symptoms. there are some other symptoms where people say they lose their sense of taste and smell, kind of basically. And then if people have severe symptoms, then they start having chest pain or chest tightness. They feel that they cannot breathe, right? So if you have any of those symptoms, basically if it's mild symptoms, just call your primary care physician's office and then they will kind of basically tell you what to do, right? At this point, we're not able to test everyone because there's still not enough testing for every single person who has symptoms. So they do have to triage and decide, okay, who needs the test and who basically has cold symptoms and is doing fine with just staying home, fluids, and rest.
Okay.
Right? What I would advise not doing, basically, I don't think it's good to just walk in an ER setting unless you're having severe symptoms.
Got you.
Meaning that you feel you cannot breathe or you feel like kind of basically, you have high fevers, your heart is racing, you feel dizzy, maybe you're dehydrated. So those are severe symptoms that require urgent evaluation and treatment. But if you have mild symptoms like a cold, just call your primary care physician and then they will take it from there. We're trying to not overwhelm our ER system. Right? So we'd like to reserve the ER for people with severe symptoms in the ER. For the rest of the people who can be managed from the primary care physician's office, then basically we should do that.
Absolutely. So basically, again, if you have the symptoms, contact your primary care physician. If you are in a point where you feel like you cannot breathe, your chest is hurting, and call 911 and then receive support.
And then they will come in and take you to an ER setting.
Thank you so much.
But we don't want to have like basically ERs full to capacity or above capacity. Then it makes them not able to deliver the care they need. They need to deliver to everyone.
Right. Thank you for that. Celeste, any final words and insight for self-care, mental well-being, wellness, all of it?
Yeah, I would just say be proactive with your day. The way mental health starts to kind of change and the way that people start to deteriorate doesn't happen overnight. I think there's a lot of things within our control and kind of, creating those boundaries and not looking at everything that you see. Get your dose of the information so that you can be informed and kind of like letting go of the rest. And then if you are in crisis and you struggle, a lot of people struggle with talking, don't have the language. I just want to repeat this crisistextline.org. It's 741-741. You can text how you feel. You do not have to be suicidal to text this crisis line. If you just want to have a conversation, and because you're struggling, like do that. That's important. So be proactive with your mental health.
That's it.
Celeste, I did have one last question for you. So to all of the nurses, the doctors that are working, these long shifts that are dealing with a lot of these patients, I've seen pictures, I've seen videos and testimonies coming from them, especially from people that are in hard to hit areas. How do they go about dealing with their mental health, and what advice would you give them to these nurses and doctors that are dealing with these patients?
Yeah, I think even outside of COVID, even if we're not talking about COVID, people in the wellness field, we struggle with that self-care because like we feel so compassionate about what we're doing. So, it's kind of up to us to really take a pause and breathe. If we need a break, we have to take a break because if we have a mental health breakdown, you're replaceable. So I really want to encourage the wellness providers to like understand that burnout in the workplace is real, and we can like curb the way the burnout takes place if we start to kind of take agency over what's going on. And so, the sick time is still there. I know that there's this compelling nature to want to support and help and do more, but you can't keep giving more than you have to give. There's only so much that we can take before we start to break down.
Absolutely. And I'd say in that same breath, there was another question about, to what degree do we think we'll have enough supplies to really take care of all of the cases we're seeing take place in Boston. Dr. Fontaine, I don't know if you could answer that, but in really listening to Celeste talk about the importance of, helping doctors and nurses know when to tap in and tap out, I think it's still a conversation about resources that are available to them as well in the space to do that.
Yes, and the thing is, I think with providers, kind of basically, it's in the back of our minds. We know, okay, you need to take care of ourselves to keep going, but sometimes the task at hand, there's so much of it that you're like, well, I just can't, right? I just can't take a break. I need to keep going. So I think hospitals are really being very careful in trying to actually reach out to a lot of doctors. Basically, so you have kind of the doctors that are affiliated at hospitals, but then they're also kind of basically keeping list of other doctors who would be willing to step in, to help out, to provide some respite for those, kind of, who are burning out or who have gotten sick, because doctors, nurses do get sick. They get exposed.
Over 100 in Boston, I think, right? We were saying, or in Massachusetts.
They get sick. You have to have a roster of people that you can call on to replace those, on the front line. And I think kind of basically all the healthcare system are kind of basically reaching far and wide to kind of basically get personal protective equipment, those masks, those gowns, and so kind of basically we are trying. I think we're all trying.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all of your efforts, keeping us alive, keeping yourselves alive, keeping the community together. The NIC and I always love to end off our show by asking the asking you all to share with the audience where people can follow you and stay connected. And, if they want to continue to support your work, your endeavors, where can they be in touch? What can they do?
So currently, I think kind of basically when you introduced me, you kind of basically listed quite a few titles.
Right. Which one do you want?
Some of them were in the past, but now I'm mostly kind of, I'm a wife, a mother, kind of basically a sister, a daughter, a primary care physician at Harvard Vanguard West Roxbury. But I'm not on social media because usually I spend the whole day in clinic. When I come home, I don't want to spend the computer.
You're like, bye.
Yeah, I understand.
Don't talk to me after this. I love it. I respect it. That's self-care. You're like, when I'm done, I'm done. So listen, if you want to stay connected with Dr. Fontaine, check out the Urban Collective's TUC 2.0 segment, okay?
You can find me and just go to celestetherapist.com. You can find me on all social media platforms at Celeste the Therapist.
And what's happening tonight, Celeste? Don't you have something happening?
Yeah, so lately I've Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. I've been just talking to people who are like dealing with this COVID crisis and how they're dealing with it, to try to educate people in all different areas of life. And tonight I have Alex E. Edwards. He's a real estate owner for Thumbprint Realty. And he's going to kind of talk about like what the housing market looks like, and are people going to be affected? These are things I don't know, but I kind of want to open up dialogue and conversation to kind of educate people around like the different areas that they might be struggling in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I hate to do this because I know we're like wrapping it all up, but then there was one question we unfortunately did miss. And Dr. Fontaine, you kind of mentioned it a bit earlier, but somebody asked if somebody were to sneeze and then 5 minutes later, somebody else walked through that sneeze, will they be able to contract this virus? I'm like, these scenarios will come out of anywhere at this point, but
right.
We want to acknowledge them.
Yeah, I think the most likely way really is for someone who has COVID-19, who has symptoms, they're coughing, they're sneezing, and you're very close to them, right? So they're coughing and those droplets are handing kind of basically, next to you, and you're inhaling, or some of them are getting into your nose or mouth. So again, it has to do, with the virus. And then kind of basically how much exposure? Was it just that you walk through and that's it? Or were you talking to that person for a long time and they sneeze and cough and cough?
So let's do this. Take it in.
The other thing also is basically, so the person has it, they're symptomatic, and then basically it depends on how much is the exposure and also how young and healthy. Somebody who's 90 may be able to withstand, kind of would get sick with minimal exposure. Someone who's young and healthy. Right. So, I mean, we cannot control every single thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But what we can do is try to control the things we can, right? Mm-hmm. So kind of just staying 6 feet away, kind of basically, and wash our hands and avoid touching your eyes, your nose, your mouth, some of which we do sometimes without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, some of these habits are things that just happen and you're not thinking. But if you've been in a public place, you've touched door handles and then you're rubbing your eyes, potentially you could be taking from the door handle and kind of injecting into your eye.
That's real. Listen, walk around with gloves and Clorox wipes. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. I really don't know, but stay protected is the point. So in short, can you get it from that sneeze? Not unlikely. This is not highly likely, y'all. Like,
right.
Walk around.
Yeah. I would not say impossible, but that's not the most likely way.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah,
exactly. Well, thank you both so much for tuning in. We're not going to have you all log off just yet. So we have a typical way where we love to close out our show. But starting with thanking you both, amazing celebrity guests in our local Boston community. Thank you so much, Dr. Fontaine, for sharing your expertise as a primary care physician, the signs of the symptoms we need to look out for, how we need to also maneuver through our own communities and our own spaces with our own loved ones and use our better judgment. And just keeping ourselves alive and healthy and very aware of the spaces we occupy. And thank you so much to Celeste the therapist, for really touching base on what it looks like for us to take care of our emotional and mental well-being while we're living through this pandemic stage in life. It's a wild time for both of you, but I thank you both for also taking care of yourselves and practicing self-care as you all treat your patients virtually, which is a new dynamic, a new reality for us out here. If you all have any questions to those who are listening to the Urban Collective, please feel free to reach out to us. Dr. Fontaine and Celeste will be accessible to you all, and so will your own primary care physicians. Celeste also shared a number of hotlines. So again, in this time, we want you all to create structure, implement that structure. Don't just write it down, but actually live it out, and continue to take care of yourselves. And so again, it's your First Lady, Bernadine Truth, alongside yours truly.
It's your man, NIC. I did want to let everyone know also the podcast episode will be up on YouTube, Facebook Live, and the episode will premiere in audio format this Saturday. And that is available on every platform from iTunes, Spotify, everything that's out there, Google Music, Google Podcasts. So make sure to check that out. And also you can visit our websites. We have some link that we updated since the last podcast. If you go, you will see a tab that says COVID-19 that has the numbers. We'll actually upload the numbers that Celeste talked about today. But we have some websites about streaming, how you can work together, about certain applications that you can use. We have an exercise app that you can do 7 minutes of exercise per day. If you want to stream Netflix together as a group, we also give you the directions of the step-by-step on how to do that. We want to be a resource for everyone that's watching us, and share it, go online, share the page or anything like that. Again, the website is www.theurbancollectiveshow.com.
Awesome. And if you're looking to follow us on Twitter, we are at the UC Show 3. If you're looking to follow us on Instagram, we are at the Urban Collective Show. On Facebook, we are also at the Urban Collective Show. So please, again, continue to follow us, continue to support, and continue to really engage with the community. And stay tuned to our next celebrity guest and our next episode next week. Take care.
Later, y'all.
Thank you.
All right. Motivational quote.
Oh, yeah, my bad. You got to.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. All right. As always, we love to close out with the motivational quote to leave you all for until the next time we are on air. And so again, in continuation and celebration of Women's History Month, we'd like to leave you all with a quote by Rachel Carson, who says, the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for destruction. So continue to stay productive, continue to stay inspired, and continue to be amazing, even though we are experiencing this pandemic. It's your First Lady, Bernadine Truth, checking out.
It's your man, NIC. Stay safe.
All
Practice
right.
social distancing, everyone.
All right.
you.
Thank you all so
All right,
much.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.